10-year-old boy sentenced by the judge, but his words silenced the entire courtroom. It was past midnight when the silence broke. A loud bang on the door, then the sound of heavy boots rushing inside. Flashlights swept across the small, cluttered house. A deep voice shouted, "Police! Don't move!" In the dim corner of a cold bedroom, a boy barely 10 years old froze under a thin blanket. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break through his chest. His name was Elijah. Before he could even sit up, the door burst open. The flashlight hit his eyes. He raised his hands, shaking. "Please, my sister." He tried to say, but rough hands grabbed him, pulled him up. From the hallway came a cry. "Elijah!" His little sister, Ava, just 4 years old, stood in her pajamas, crying. She tried to run to him, but someone stopped her gently. "Don't take him," she screamed, reaching out. "Please don't take my brother." Elijah looked at her over his shoulder as the officers pulled him away. "It's okay, Ava," he said, voice breaking. "Be brave for me. Just a little longer." That's how it started. Not with a warning, not with questions. Just noise, fear, and a boy in handcuffs. Outside, the red and blue lights painted the small street. A few neighbors had come out, staring. Some shook their heads. One whispered, "Knew that boy would get in trouble one day." Another added, "Just like his mom." Elijah didn't look up. He kept his head down as they led him to the car. His wrists hurt from the cuffs, and his chest felt even tighter. Not because of fear, but because Ava was alone now. She had no one else. Back inside the house, Ava sat on a worn-out couch, sobbing into the arms of a social worker. Her curls were messy, her face red from crying. She kept saying, "I want my brother." The woman tried to calm her, offered her a granola bar, but she pushed it away. "I want Elijah," she cried again, curling up like a small ball. Meanwhile, Elijah sat quietly in the back of the police car. He stared at the front seat, his thoughts racing. He wasn't thinking about the arrest, the handcuffs, or the noise. He was thinking about Ava. Had she eaten anything? Was she scared? Cold? He closed his eyes and whispered something only he could hear. "I'm sorry, Ava. I'll fix this. I promised." Later at the station, they placed him in a holding cell. The walls were blank. The light above flickered every few seconds. He sat on the edge of a hard bench, still in his thin pajamas, still shaking. The only thing they let him keep was a crumpled drawing Ava had made, a picture of the two of them, holding hands. She had drawn a little cape on his back and written, "Best brother ever," in purple crayon. He held it like it was the most important thing in the world. His lawyer, Mr. Rodriguez, came in after a while. He was tired, older, with kind but worried eyes. "Elijah," he said gently, "they found the stolen medicine in your house. They also have footage from the pharmacy. It doesn't look good." Elijah didn't answer. Mr. Rodriguez tried again. "You've been in trouble before. They're going to bring all of that up. Shoplifting, the graffiti, even the food theft. I need you to tell me why. Help me help you." Still nothing. Elijah kept staring at the picture. The lawyer sighed, packed up his folder. "The trial is in a few days. The judge is tough. He doesn't play around. If you don't talk, they'll throw the book at you." The cell door closed again, and Elijah was alone. He lay down, curling up with Ava's drawing pressed to his chest. The cold bench didn't bother him as much as the cold in his heart. In the dark, he whispered one more time, "Just be brave, Ava. Just a little longer. I'll come back for you. I promise." The news traveled fast. By sunrise, Elijah's face, blurred because of his age, was already on the local news. The headline read, "10-year-old breaks into pharmacy. Community demands action." They didn't mention Ava. They didn't mention hunger. They didn't ask why. Across town, in living rooms and coffee shops, people whispered over their morning routines. Some shook their heads. Others said things like, "Where were the parents?" Or, "These kids today, no respect." The grocery store owner, who once gave Elijah a free apple when he was little, now told a reporter, "He stole bread and milk right out from under my nose, looked me straight in the eye, no shame at all." No one knew that Elijah had offered to sweep floors just for leftovers. The school principal chimed in, saying, "He's been a problem since the 4th grade. Always tired, sometimes late, barely speaks." No one asked why a 10-year-old looked so exhausted all the time. The internet comments were worse. "Try him as an adult. If you're old enough to break in, you're old enough to be locked up. Where's CPS when you need them?" Behind every post was someone eager to label, but not to listen. Meanwhile, Elijah sat alone in that cold, gray cell. He still hadn't said a word, not to the guards, not to his lawyer, not even when offered snacks or soft blankets. He just sat there, staring at Ava's drawing, the one with the cape. Outside, the social worker who had comforted Ava the night before, her name was Miss Thompson, sat in her car, parked just outside the juvenile center. She hadn't been able to sleep. Something about Elijah's silence, Ava's cries, and the state of their home, it didn't sit right with her. She opened her notebook, flipping back to her notes from the arrest. No heat, no food, no light, no signs of adult care. She circled a line she'd written in the middle of the night. This boy was parenting his sister. Across town, Ava was now in a foster home. The family was kind. They had toys, warm food, and soft beds. But none of that made up for the fact that Elijah was gone. Every time someone opened a door or a drawer, she flinched. Every time someone asked if she wanted more juice, she said, "Is Elijah coming too?" She wasn't eating much, just holding the cookie she saved for him, wrapped tight in a napkin, tucked in her pajama pocket. Back at the juvenile center, Officer Jenkins was one of the few who looked at Elijah with anything but judgment. She noticed how he didn't act, like other kids who came through. No yelling, no kicking, no eye-rolling, just silence. She crouched beside his cell one evening. "Your sister's okay," she told him softly. "They found her a warm place. She misses you." He looked up at her for the first time. Not long, just enough to let her see something behind his eyes. Not guilt, not fear of punishment, just pain. And something deeper. Worry. "Sometimes," she added carefully, "it's okay to let someone else help. You don't have to do everything yourself." Elijah blinked, then went back to staring at the drawing. Back in court, preparations for the trial began. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Chin, stood before the judge and listed Elijah's previous charges: shoplifting, graffiti, trespassing, and now theft of prescription medicine. This child is escalating. He needs structure. He needs consequences. Judge Harrison looked over the file. It was thick for someone so young. He didn't say much, just nodded and asked when the trial would begin. But that night, back in his chambers, he sat at his desk longer than usual. He looked at Elijah's file again. Then out the window toward the side of town where Elijah lived. The broken houses, the flickering streetlights, the forgotten corners. He'd seen this story before. But something about Elijah made him pause. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the sister's cries. Maybe it was because 30 years ago he'd been the boy, sitting in that chair. Not with a sister to care for, but with his own share of silent pain and no one who'd bothered to ask why he acted out. He set the file down slowly. Outside, the world moved on. Faster, louder, busier. But in a small courtroom and a cold cell, something waited in silence. Not defiance, not danger. Just a story no one had heard yet. And the only person who could tell it was a 10-year-old boy with tired eyes, a crumpled drawing, and a promise he refused to break. It was Elijah's first time in a courtroom, but not his first time feeling small. He sat on a wooden bench too big for him, his feet not touching the ground. His hands stayed clenched in his lap, and he stared at a single scratch on the table, in front of him, like if he looked up, something worse might be waiting. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung off his bony shoulders. It wasn't made for kids, just like this place wasn't made for kids. People filed into the courtroom one by one. Neighbors, reporters, shop owners, people from school. Some were there out of curiosity. Others, out of judgment. No one was there. For him, Miss Thompson sat near the front. She had her notebook open and pen ready, but she wasn't scribbling today. She was just watching him, eyes soft, expression thoughtful, like she saw something no one else was looking for. The prosecutor rose. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, her voice confident and cold. Your Honor, we're here today because of a pattern, a dangerous one. This is not a one-time mistake. This is the fourth offense in 3 months. First shoplifting, then vandalism, then trespassing. And now, breaking and entering into a pharmacy to steal prescription drugs. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. A few heads shook. Some whispered under their breath. He's only 10. That's not normal. Sounds like a lost cause. Miss Thompson's jaw tightened. The prosecutor pointed toward the screen behind her. Grainy black and white footage played, a small figure slipping through a pharmacy window, moving quickly, purposefully. That's him, she said. That's your defendant. He knew what he was doing. He planned it. This isn't some confused child. This is someone escalating toward real danger. Elijah didn't look at the screen. He already knew what was on it. His lawyer, Mr. Rodriguez, leaned in and whispered, You still have time to speak up. One sentence from you could change this. But Elijah didn't speak. He couldn't. Not yet. So, Mr. Rodriguez stood, a little unsure, a little tired, and tried to defend a boy who wouldn't defend himself. Elijah has no prior record beyond these incidents. No violence, no threats. He's 10 years old, and there's more to his story, more than what this courtroom has seen. I believe... He looked at Elijah. I know there's a reason. He's not a danger. He's in pain. The judge remained silent. Witnesses began taking the stand. Green, the grocery store owner, spoke first. He stole bread and milk, just stuffed it in his jacket and walked out. When I confronted him, he ran. The prosecutor nodded. Did he ever ask for help? Mrs. Green hesitated. He said he'd clean the floors if I gave him some food, but I thought he was joking. Kids say things like that. In the audience, someone muttered, Still no excuse. Mr. Peterson, the neighbor, went next. I caught him going through my trash late at night. Not once, 3 times. I thought it was raccoons. But no, it was that boy. No one asked why a 10-year-old would need to dig through garbage. Mrs. Martinez from next door followed. He was always out late. I called his mother a few times. Never got an answer. It's no wonder he turned out like this. Elijah's hands stayed tightly clasped. His face, unreadable. But Miss Thompson noticed something. His right thumb. Rubbing his left wrist over and over again, she wrote a single word in her notebook. Anxiety. Then came the graffiti photo from the school. Red spray paint on the wall. Ms. Davis is mean to kids. The prosecutor read the words out loud, letting them hang there. This was a threat. A teacher, publicly targeted. Not the action of a child just acting out. He broke into the school to send a message. Ms. Davis nodded proudly from the gallery. But Miss Thompson frowned. She remembered a note she found in Ava's school file. A teacher's complaint. Ava fell asleep during story time, repeatedly. Suspected disinterest. No one had considered exhaustion or hunger. The day Dragged on, more evidence, more cold stares, more silence from Elijah. By late afternoon, the judge leaned forward, elbows on his desk, voice deep and steady. "Young man," he said, "you've been given a chance here. A chance to explain yourself, to give this court some reason, any reason to reconsider. But you've remained silent. That doesn't help you. In fact, it hurts you." Still, Elijah said nothing. Miss Thompson watched the judge closely. Something about the way he looked at Elijah. It wasn't anger. It was something else. Frustration, maybe. Or maybe confusion. This case didn't add up, and the judge could feel it. But the law didn't move on feelings. If you say nothing, tomorrow, the judge warned, I'll have no choice but to proceed with full sentencing. The session ended. The people stood. They whispered and shook their heads again. As Elijah was led back to his cell, his eyes finally scanned the crowd. For a second, he met Miss Thompson's gaze, and in that quiet second, she saw it again. Not guilt, not defiance, just a boy carrying a secret too big for his shoulders. She circled one more note in her book. We're all looking at what he did. No one's asking why he had to. Before the courtroom, before the orange jumpsuit, before the flashing lights, there was just a boy, a little girl, and a house that had slowly stopped feeling like home. The house was always cold, not just from the broken heater, but from the kind of silence that settled when grown-ups stopped trying, the kind that made every night feel like winter, no matter the season. It used to be better. Elijah remembered a time when his mom laughed at cartoons with Ava, when the fridge had actual food inside and the light stayed on after dark. But things had changed. His mom lost her job at the diner. Bills started piling up, unopened. The lights dimmed, then flickered, then went out completely. One by one, the basics disappeared. Milk, soap, heat, hope. At first, she promised it was temporary. "I'm just tired," she'd say. "It's just a rough patch." But the rough patch stretched into weeks, then months. Soon, she was sleeping more than she was awake. Bottles filled the trash can faster than groceries filled the fridge. And Elijah became something more than a big brother. He became the one who cooked, even if all he had was rice and tap water. He became the one who made sure Ava brushed her teeth, even if there wasn't any toothpaste left. He was the one who held her when she cried from hunger at night. "I'm the big brother," he told her once, tucking her in beneath 2 coats. "That means I keep you safe. That's my job." Ava had nodded sleepily, believing him like only a 4-year-old could, but Elijah knew he couldn't keep that promise with just stories and cuddles. He needed real help, real food, real medicine. That's when he started going out at night. First, it was just to check the corner store's dumpster. He found a stale loaf of bread and a few bananas too soft to sell. He brought them home like treasure. Ava thought it was magic. He made her pretend it was a game. Dumpster dinner, he called it. Leftovers from the king's feast. He made up royal names for each meal, like Princess Banana Bread and Knight's Noodles. She laughed between bites. And he laughed with her, even when he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it up. He tried asking neighbors, too. Quiet knocks on doors, small voices. "Do you have any food you're not going to eat? Just for my sister. She's little." Most didn't answer. A few told him to go home. One woman gave him half a box of cereal, then told him never to come back. So he stopped asking, and started taking. He knew where Mrs. Green kept the bread near the back of the store. He memorized which. Nights the delivery truck came. He learned to move fast, and always, always keep Ava out of it. When he took the medicine from the pharmacy, it wasn't because he wanted to steal. Ava had been sick for days. Her forehead was hot, her skin pale. She cried in her sleep, talking to invisible people. Elijah tried to wake their mom, but she didn't move. just rolled over and muttered something about aspirin. He didn't know which medicine Ava needed. He just remembered the commercials, bright bottles, smiling kids, words like fever reducer and multi-symptom relief. He broke in through the back window he'd tested a week earlier, just in case. He took as many children's medicines as he could carry: syrups, chewables, fever pills. He didn't care about anything else. And then he ran home, mixing doses carefully, reading labels by flashlight, whispering, "Please work." That night, he sat by Ava's bed and watched her breathing. Every cough sounded like thunder. Every shiver made his stomach twist. He didn't sleep. He just watched and prayed and whispered over and over, "Stay with me, Ava. Just hold on." By morning, her fever had broken. He cried into his hands so she wouldn't hear, and when she opened her eyes and smiled weakly, he smiled back, though he felt like he'd been run over by life itself. The school graffiti happened days later. Ava had fallen asleep in her kindergarten class. Again, Miss Davis had pulled her out and scolded her in front of the other kids. "She's not trying hard enough," the teacher told Elijah that afternoon when he came to walk Ava home. "She needs more discipline." Elijah wanted to scream, "She needs food," but instead, he stayed quiet, nodded, took Ava's hand and walked her home. That night, while Ava slept, he found a can of red spray paint in the garage next door. The words weren't meant as a threat. They were just a message from someone too small to be heard. "Ms. Davis is mean to kids." That was the only way he knew to say it, that Ava wasn't bad, that being tired didn't mean she didn't care, that someone needed to care about them for once. But no one asked, not when he stole food. Not when he sprayed that wall. Not even when he broke into the pharmacy. They only saw the act, not the reason. Not the nights he skipped dinner so Ava could eat. Not the way he counted coins to keep the lights on for 5 more minutes. Not the way he whispered bedtime stories when she was too hungry to fall asleep. He wasn't a criminal. He was a brother. Trying to keep a promise. One the world kept trying to make him break. The courtroom had never felt so heavy. The second day of Elijah's trial began just like the first. Papers shuffling, whispers in the benches, the sharp sound of heels on tile. But something was different. The kind of silence that sat in the air wasn't just quiet. It was tense, like the room itself was waiting for something to happen. Elijah sat in the same chair, still small, still quiet. His jumpsuit still too big for his frame. His eyes still focused on the same scratch on the table. But today, he didn't look empty. Today, he looked like a balloon stretched too tight. Not from defiance, not from pride, but from something aching to get out. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked at him carefully. "Young man," he said slowly, "I'm giving you one more chance. You've heard everything said about you, all the stories, all the labels, but I'm asking you, just once, to tell us your truth. If there is anything you want us to know, now is the time." The room waited. Everyone assumed they already knew the story. They thought they'd seen all there was to see. A kid who stole, a kid who broke in, a kid who deserved to learn a lesson. Elijah's lawyer gave him a small nudge, whispering, "You don't have to say everything. Just something. One word. It's enough to start." For a long time, Elijah didn't move, just sat frozen. Then his thumb stopped rubbing his wrist, and he looked up. Not at the judge, not at the prosecutor, not even at his lawyer. He looked at Miss Thompson, sitting in the front row, and something passed between them. The kind of look that says, "You saw me. You didn't turn away." Then Elijah took a breath so deep it made his shoulders shake, and in a voice that sounded like it hadn't been used in weeks, he whispered, "It wasn't vandalism." At first, no one reacted. It was so soft that people weren't sure they heard right. The judge leaned forward, I'm sorry, son. Say that again? Elijah swallowed. His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall. It wasn't vandalism. The wall, at the school. He looked at the prosecutor, then at the photo of the red spray-painted message that had been shown over and over. Ms. Davis is mean to kids. I wasn't trying to scare her, Elijah said, voice louder now, trembling. She yelled at my sister, Ava, because she fell asleep in class. But Ava wasn't bad. She was just tired. She hadn't eaten for 2 days. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge blinked. Elijah didn't stop. I didn't know how else to tell someone. Nobody listened when I asked for help. They just told me to go away, so I wrote it. On the wall? I didn't mean to hurt anyone. The courtroom shifted. Even the prosecutor lowered her pen. Elijah looked down again. I didn't want anyone to think Ava was bad. She's not. She's just little. She gets scared at night when there's no food. I didn't want her to feel like it was her fault. A silence followed that no one dared to break. Then Miss Thompson slowly stood. Your Honor, she said gently, I believe it's time this court saw the full picture. The judge nodded. Miss Thompson approached the front with a small folder and a single sheet of paper drawn in crayon. This was found in Ava's room during the house check, she explained. It's a drawing she made before Elijah's arrest. She handed it to the judge. It showed 2 stick figures, one taller, one smaller, holding hands beneath a big sun. The taller one had a cape. In shaky letters, it said, My brother keeps me safe. He's my superhero. The judge's lips pressed together tightly. He turned the page over. More drawings, more crayon notes. He makes me rice soup. He reads stories even when the lights go out. He makes the monsters go away. The judge looked back at Elijah. This boy, Miss Thompson said, her voice thick, wasn't just committing crimes. He was surviving. He was trying to keep his sister alive, warm, fed, and safe. He was being what every child should never have to be, a parent. People began to stir in their seats. Mrs. Green, the store owner, lowered her head into her hands. Mr. Peterson rubbed his face, blinking hard. Even Ms. Davis, the teacher, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. It was all starting to make sense now. The food, the graffiti, the medicine, the silence. Elijah hadn't been hiding guilt. He'd been carrying a secret so big it nearly crushed him. The why. Judge cleared his throat, but his voice cracked anyway. Elijah, he said quietly. Why didn't you tell anyone? Elijah hesitated. Then his answer came out like a stone he'd carried too long. Because when I asked for help, they said they'd take Ava away. His voice broke on her name. They said she'd go to a different house, a different family. And I promised I'd never leave her, that I'd always protect her. His face crumbled then. The tears finally came. But he didn't try to wipe them away. In the back of the courtroom, someone stood up. It was Mrs. Martinez. Your Honor, she said. He's right. He came to my door once. He asked for food, said his sister was hungry. I told him to go home. I said it wasn't my problem. She looked at Elijah with tears in her eyes, but it was. One by one, others stood. The shopkeeper, the teacher, the neighbor. Each one remembered a time Elijah had reached out, and each one had turned away, not because they were cruel, but because it was easier not to see. And now they had. Now it was impossible not to. You could feel the shift before anyone spoke. The courtroom that had once felt so sure of Elijah's guilt now held its breath. People had come expecting punishment. They left with something else entirely. A mirror. A reflection of all the ways they'd chosen comfort over kindness, silence over action. Mrs. Martinez sat back down slowly, her voice still echoing. It was my problem. The judge didn't speak right away. He sat still, Ava's drawing resting on his bench. He ran a hand over the little stick figures. The boy with the cape, Elijah with the cape. It said everything no police report could. The prosecutor stood. Her hands were still, no longer flipping papers. "Your Honor," she said, softer than before. "The state is reviewing its position. We didn't know the full story." She glanced at Elijah, then looked away. It was easier to face the law than it was to face a child you'd judged unfairly. The judge nodded but said nothing. Then a voice rose from the middle row. "I'd like to speak, if that's allowed." It was Reverend Collins from First Baptist Church, a man who rarely attended trials. He stood slowly, hands clasped in front of him, looking not at the judge, but at Elijah. "My church has a house next door. It's been sitting empty for years. It was meant to be a youth center, but we never got the funding. If the court allows, I'd like to offer it to Elijah and his sister. A real home. Not a foster placement. A space where they can stay together." The room shifted again. Elijah lifted his head slightly, hope flickering behind the tears. The Reverend continued, "We've got folks in the congregation, doctors, teachers, retired cooks, people who want to help now, who just needed someone to show them why." The judge still didn't speak. Another person stood. "Mrs. Green from the store." "I'd like to withdraw my complaint," she said, her voice shaking. "And if Elijah still wants to sweep the floors, I'll hire him. Real pay, real hours. He asked me once. I said no. That was my failure, not his." One by one, more voices followed. Mr. Carlton from the pharmacy. "I want to set up a fund for families who can't afford medicine. Call it the Elijah Fund." Ms. Davis, the teacher. "I misjudged Ava. I never asked the right questions. I'd like to offer free tutoring for both of them." Even Mr. Peterson stood up. "I've got a spare heater and blankets, and I'll install them myself, free of charge." Elijah sat still, overwhelmed, shoulders trembling under the weight of this strange, unfamiliar thing. Kindness. After months of trying to do it all alone, the room was finally saying, "We see you now." "We're here." The judge leaned forward at last. "Elijah," he said, voice rough but steady, "what you did, stealing, breaking and entering, lying, it was wrong. The law doesn't ignore those things, but we also must recognize when the law has only seen part of the truth." He looked around the courtroom. "Today we've heard the rest of it. A child trying to survive. A brother trying to keep a promise. A community that failed before this boy ever did." He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I'm suspending sentencing for 6 months. During that time, Elijah and Ava will be placed in the church's care, with the oversight of child services and the support of this community." Murmurs of agreement filled the air. Elijah will attend school. Ava will receive medical care. And this town will do the job we should have done from the start. Take care of our children. The room rose to its feet, not in applause, but in quiet honor. A new kind of silence settled, not of guilt, but of responsibility. Miss Thompson stood and walked over to Elijah. "Ready to see your new home?" she asked gently. Elijah blinked, still unsure if this was real. "Can Ava come with me?" he asked quietly. "She's already waiting outside," Miss Thompson said, smiling. "She wouldn't stop asking when she could see you." Elijah's hands finally relaxed. Outside the courthouse, Ava sat on the steps holding her crayon drawing. When she saw her brother step into the sunlight, she ran, barefoot, dress too big, curls wild in the wind. "Elijah!" she cried, rapping. Her arms around his waist. "I saved you a cookie." He dropped to his knees, pulling her into the tightest hug. "I missed you, Bug," he whispered. "I told everyone you were a hero," she said proudly, and for the first time in a long time, Elijah believed it might be true. The little house next to the church didn't look like much from the outside, peeling white paint, rusty hinges, a mailbox hanging crooked from one nail. Just another quiet building on a quiet street in a town that almost forgot how loud silence could be. But inside, something different was happening now. Inside, there was warmth. There was Ava's, laughter echoing down the hallway, her tiny feet stomping across the floor in oversized socks. There was the smell of food from a real kitchen, Miss Thompson's spaghetti bubbling on the stove. With garlic toast Ava insisted on calling magic. Bread. There was soft light from a lamp someone had donated, and a bookshelf filled with stories that no longer had to be made up just to feel full. And there was Elijah. In clean clothes, sitting at a desk someone built just for him, pencil in hand. Ava's crayon drawing now framed above his head. A new drawing sat beside it. This one showed a small house surrounded by people, some with tools, some with books, some with trays of food. Ava had written our family at the top, not just Elijah and Ava anymore. Everyone. It took time for Elijah to believe he was really safe. The first few nights, he still tucked food under his bed. Old habits from too many hungry nights. The first time the power flickered, he panicked. When the doorbell rang unexpectedly, his whole body stiffened. But slowly, the fear began to melt. Not because he was told to be calm, but because this time, someone was there to say, "It's okay. You're not alone anymore." Miss Thompson stayed close. So did Reverend Collins, who stopped by every evening just to ask about their day. Sometimes he brought books, sometimes cookies. Once, he brought a toolbox and taught Elijah how to fix the back door. "Tools help," he said. But knowing. Someone will show up when things break? That's what really fixes people. Ava was the first to bloom. She started kindergarten fresh, fed, rested, and finally able to be a child. She made friends easily. She talked about Elijah like he was a superhero from a comic book. "He saved me," she'd say, casually, like she was talking about getting a toy off a high shelf. Elijah, meanwhile, had started writing, not just for school, but for himself. At first, the stories were simple. A little boy and his sister escaping a cold kingdom ruled by empty fridges and quiet neighbors. Then, they grew richer, filled with dragons made of loneliness and villains called shame. But always, always, the hero was a boy who refused to stop loving, no matter what. Miss Andrews, the school's reading specialist, noticed. "You've got something here," she told him one afternoon. "You don't just write, you see. That's what real writers do." He submitted one story to a statewide youth writing contest. He didn't tell anyone, just dropped it in the mail and forgot about it. Weeks later, an envelope arrived. He'd won a scholarship, a certificate, a letter that said, "Your story reminded us what matters most. Love, bravery, and never giving up." Elijah didn't cry when he read it. He just walked outside, sat on the porch with Ava, and said quietly, "We're going to be okay, Bug." She nodded like she already knew. The judge visited one afternoon, not in robes, just in jeans and a tired sweater. "I never told you," he said, handing Elijah a second envelope. "But I used to be like you. Angry, scared, quiet. Someone gave me a second chance, too." Inside was a photo, a younger Judge Harrison standing with his own father in front of a juvenile detention center. On the back, it read, "This is where I decided to become better. Not bitter." Elijah looked up. "Is that what I have to do now?" The judge smiled. "No, you're already doing it. Just don't stop." They sat together for a while in the golden afternoon light, watching Ava chase butterflies in the backyard. No talk of cases. No more trials, just life unfolding, quietly, beautifully. Months passed. The house stayed full, not just with food and books, but with people. Volunteers from the church, neighbors who once turned away now showed up with open hands and soft hearts. The grocery store started a program called Elijah's Basket, where anyone in need could take a meal, no questions asked. The school introduced a Safe Voices board, where students could write concerns anonymously because not every cry for help looks like a loud scream. Sometimes it's a tired kid falling asleep during story time. Sometimes it's red spray paint on a brick wall. And sometimes it's silence. But now they listened. Now they saw. One evening, Elijah tucked Ava into bed, her stomach full, her nightlight glowing, her curls finally healthy again. She looked up and whispered, "Do we have to be superheroes anymore?" Elijah thought for a moment, then smiled. "No," he said. "Now we just get to be kids." She grinned sleepily. "Good. Superheroes get really tired." He laughed. "Yeah, they do." He kissed her forehead and turned out the light. Then he sat at his desk, opened a fresh notebook, and began to write. Not a story of hunger, or pain, or fear. A new one. One that started like this. Once, there was a boy who thought he had to carry the whole world on his shoulders. But then the world turned around and carried him for a while instead. That's when he learned something important. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't staying silent to protect someone. Sometimes it's speaking up to protect yourself. And sometimes, the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who whisper hope into dark places, until the light finds its way in. And in that quiet house, beside a church that finally remembered what it was for, Elijah kept writing. Because stories like his weren't just meant to be told, they were meant to be heard, and this time, everyone was listening.